When Ethan Cole staggered out from the edge of Red Eagle Glacier in April 2017, he was barely recognizable. Barefoot, emaciated to the bone, hair and beard, long and matted stiff, draped in frigid, tattered scraps of fabric in place of clothing. The man had vanished 6 years earlier along with his 2 teammates in one of the most treacherous icy regions of Glacier National Park, and everyone had long believed they were dead. But the most terrifying thing was not his ravaged appearance. The most terrifying thing was what he recounted about those 6 years. About what really happened to Marissa and Josh, and about the thing that had lived alongside them in the deep icy darkness for all that time. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. On December 3, 2011, an early winter Saturday in Glacier National Park, a thin layer of mist blanketed the 2 Medicine area, signaling a cold but clear day, ideal conditions for snowmobile groups heading into deep snow terrain. For most visitors, this was simply a perfect time to enjoy the silent, snow-covered mountains in winter. But for the trio of Ethan Cole, Marissa Hale, and Joshua Rennick, that morning marked the start of a meticulously planned day trip, expected to last only until evening. According to information provided by their parents to rangers, all 3 had extensive winter off-trail experience and always prepared thoroughly before each outing. The destination they registered for that day was the 2 Medicine route heading into Red Eagle Basin, an unmarked icy corridor notorious for its rugged terrain and snow depths that could change abruptly from one section to the next. At exactly 9 a.m., the camera at the cut bank entrance captured footage of the group's 3 snowmobiles entering the park in a steady formation. They traveled together, with no signs of equipment issues or plan changes. According to the duty station staff report, all 3 appeared focused, proactive, and showed no signs of anxiety. Based on receipts and checks at the parking area, the group carried standard gear for a day trip: spare fuel, personal locator beacons, some quick energy food, and enhanced windproof jackets. Their goal was to cross the northern snow corridor to reach the edge of Red Eagle Basin before the sun dropped too low, then return on schedule. The route they chose was not a standard snowmobile trail. It had no fixed markers, with navigation relying almost entirely on natural terrain features and rare landmarks on the mountainsides. By 3 p.m., according to later correlated personal locator data, all 3 signals stopped when they entered an out-of-coverage area. From that point onward, there were no further communication records. When 8 p.m. came, and the 3 still had not returned to 2 Medicine as per their registered schedule, and with no contact made to the checkpoint, family concern quickly turned to panic. Ethan, Marissa, and Joshua were experienced individuals who always checked in before leaving the park, so all 3 losing contact simultaneously on the same evening was a clear red flag. Around 9 p.m., as darkness enveloped all of Glacier and outdoor temperatures began dropping rapidly, their parents called the park's emergency line to officially report the group overdue. Immediately after that call, the information was relayed directly to the ranger station at 2 Medicine, where the night shift team conducted an initial risk assessment and activated Level 1 search and rescue protocol, the standard response for lost contact cases in winter conditions. However, the timing of the disappearance coincided with a period of sharply falling temperatures and strengthening winds along the 2 Medicine Red Eagle Basin route, forcing rangers to initially limit search operations to the parking area and entrance zones. Registration records showed the only committed route was the northeast corridor through the frozen valley and along the winter trail leading directly into Red Eagle Basin, so rangers immediately dispatched 2 search teams along the main path, using snow headlights and short-range locator equipment to sweep the line. On the first night, no signals were received from the group's backup devices, even though long-range relay points remained operational. The complete lack of response signals forced the SAR team to consider prolonged loss of contact in no-coverage zones, but it also raised the possibility that the group was no longer within their original route area. By dawn, On December 4th, SAR was escalated to expanded deployment. A temporary command center was set up at 2 Medicine for coordination, while additional deep snow-experienced rangers were called in from East Glacier to bolster manpower and specialized gear. The search area was divided into 3 segments: the main ice corridor typically used by snowmobiles, 2 secondary branches leading up less traveled winter slopes, and the foothill zone toward Red Eagle Basin, with its complex terrain prone to wind scouring and snow cover obliteration. Throughout 12 continuous hours of deployment, no direct discoveries related to the missing group were made. Teams equipped with thermal detectors had their data disrupted by thick snow layers and high wind speeds at narrow valley points. Movement became more difficult as fresh snowfall covered all potential snowmobile tracks. Several triangular search lines had to be canceled due to snow depths exceeding safe thresholds for specialized vehicles. In the report sent to the Coordination Center, the team responsible for the intersection area toward Red Eagle Basin noted unusually heavy snow accumulation in just a few hours, wiping out all potential traces before they could be verified. Unable to gather visual data or supporting locator signals, SAR Command decided to expand the search beyond the originally registered route. This required reinforcing with additional forces from East Glacier, including 2 winter terrain-adapted teams and a snowcat rescue unit. By the afternoon of December 4th, the new teams reached the area, reinforced the search grid, and began sweeping in arc patterns, prioritizing snow pockets, frozen lake edges, sudden elevation changes, and terrain breaks prone to snowmobile accidents. Despite the expanded scale, the second day's weather restrictions, strong winds, dense fog, and fresh ice cover severely reduced SR effectiveness. Low-altitude drone flight time was limited, while K9 units could only operate in areas under 2 square miles due to plunging temperatures and shifting winds. By day's end, the SAR Command Center recorded the same result from all search teams: no fresh slide marks, no personal items found, and no disturbed snow areas with direct ties to the 3 missing individuals. The consolidated report after more than 12 hours of effort showed 0 locator signals or physical traces from the group, forcing command to reassess initial assumptions about travel direction and incident likelihood. In that context, SAR decided to adjust strategy, expanding the search beyond the registered route and preparing to escalate levels if weather continued to deteriorate. It was during this expansion phase, when reinforcements from East Glacier were deployed on the morning of December 5, 2011, that the search first recorded a specific landmark: 3 snowmobiles abandoned in a narrow snow valley, offset more than 1 mile southeast of the 2 Medicine Red Eagle Basin line. The area was a natural depression where strong winds regularly scoured through, piling snow thick and obscuring visibility, so the vehicles only became visible when SAR approached at close range. At the scene, the 3 snowmobiles were noted 11 to 15 meters apart, not in standard travel formation. One faced west, the other 2 northeast, as if halted abruptly mid-turn. Engine status showed all 3 fully cold, no residual warmth, no signs of recent operation. Fuel levels in the tanks remained relatively full, not indicative of prolonged continuous travel. No items belonging to Ethan, Marissa, or Joshua were found nearby. Notably, the surrounding snow showed no human footprints or drag marks, only deep sinkage, possibly from snowmobile tracks, predating fresh snow. These sink lines, when cross-referenced by length and depth, appeared to date back at least 2 days, but the group's exit direction could not be determined because all subsequent traces were completely buried under thick, new snow. K9 units were brought in shortly after to scent track the missing group's final path. Initially, the dogs picked up a scent from behind one of the 3 snowmobiles and followed it northeast, covering a gentle slope of about 200 meters. However, near the edge of a strong wind-scoured band, the scent trail vanished entirely. Handlers noted the area had snow structure disrupted by constant wind, strong enough to erase all remaining scent traces. Some snow samples were collected for analysis, but yielded no immediate additional information. While sweeping the nearby radius, Another team noted the unusual presence of a silver Honda CR-V, parked a few hundred meters from the scene, in what should have been a restricted winter zone, where motorized vehicles were prohibited, except for official personnel. The vehicle was partially snow-covered, but not fully buried, suggesting it had not been parked for long. However, Sarau found no fresh footprints or tire tracks around it, only a deep wind-blown snow halo around the wheels. The license plate was not checked on site because priority at the time was verifying the abandoned snowmobile's relevance. The scene report clearly noted the CR-V discovery as supplementary information requiring later cross-checking. Upon completing the preliminary inspection, Sarau mapped detailed positions of each snowmobile, vehicle orientations, equipment status, and compressed snow zones possibly related to movement activity. There were no signs that any vehicle had broken down or collided before being abandoned, and no indications the group had set up camp or sought temporary shelter nearby. The scene's anomalies: 3 intact vehicles, no footprints, no items, no clear exit direction, were immediately reported to SARA Command, marking a shift from route-based search to analysis of a scene potentially tied to a more complex incident than initially anticipated. After confirming the location of the 3 abandoned snowmobiles and completing primary scene documentation on the afternoon of December 5, 2011, SARA Command immediately adjusted the search strategy by expanding the sweep radius to approximately 15 square miles around the snow valley where the vehicles were found. This expansion aimed to rule out any possibility that Ethan Cole, Marissa Hale, and Joshua Rennick had left the snowmobiles to seek temporary shelter or inadvertently moved into inaccessible terrain before weather worsened. SARA was divided into 4 main teams, each assigned a specific terrain type: natural crevasses and seasonal ice cracks, common at the edge of Red Eagle Basin, seasonal frozen lakes, capable of forming thin ice traps, steep slopes, prone to avalanches, and narrow valleys, where strong winds could obliterate movement traces. The crevasse team began with probing poles, short-range ground-penetrating radar, and safety ropes to inspect every crack within a 2-mile radius of the snowmobile position. Crevasses deeper than 3 meters were marked and lowered with thermal cameras to ensure no deep buried targets were missed. Results showed no heat signatures or anomalous objects related to humans. Concurrently, the frozen lake team approached 5 seasonal lakes, where early winter ice was often not thick enough for heavy loads. They drilled ice cores to check thickness, used iron stakes to mark load-bearing capacity, and deployed underwater motion buoys to detect potential ice collapse. Although several thin ice spots were found, no evidence indicated heavy objects had fallen through or ice had broken near the time of disappearance. On the eastern slopes, where wind scouring was strongest, terrain teams inspected high-inclination sections using snowshoes and anchor lines to avoid avalanche risks. In some areas, wind-disrupted thick snow appeared, but not from human or mechanical activity. Closer surveys with long probes and low-altitude drone cameras led SAR to conclude there were no recent snow pockets or voids showing impact. Most notably, the northern valley area, draining from Red Eagle Basin in a classic bowl shape, was rated high probability if the group had left the snowmobiles, seeking an escape route down steep terrain. SAR employed fan-pattern sweeps from the valley center outward, with spacing under 50 meters between lines to avoid missing small traces. When reaching unstable frozen sections, they deployed low-altitude drones to minimize ice slide risks. Drones equipped with infrared cameras captured large snow surfaces at sufficient resolution to detect drag marks, dropped items, or anomalous deformations. However, each flight was limited to short durations due to wind and rapid battery drain in low temperatures. All data collected that day was sent to command for cross-referencing with terrain maps and wind directions to identify any anomalies potentially linked to the 3 missing individuals. By the end of December 6, reports from all 4 teams showed no personal items such as stray gloves, goggles, tool pouches, or scattered ski tracks found across the entire 15-square-mile area. The complete absence of movement traces from the abandoned snowmobile site led to two conclusions: either the group departed in a direction that fresh snowfall completely covered within hours, or they did not move on foot along any route that would leave clear signs. K9 units were redeployed repeatedly in three areas more likely to retain scent: low gullies, lake edges, and wind-sheltered rock clusters, but all resulted in the same outcome: faint, quickly treacherous scent trails ending abruptly, matching what occurred at the snowmobile scene. Points flagged for recheck the next day included the strong wind-scoured band to the northeast, and a cluster of large rocks potentially large enough for temporary shelter, though no signs had been found there yet. By the third day of the expanded search, the sweep covered the entire area that behavioral analysis and winter conditions suggested the missing group could have traversed if they left the snowmobiles to escape or take shelter. However, the total lack of any personal items, things that typically scatter in emergencies or disorientation, became the single biggest obstacle, preventing SAR from determining a plausible direction of travel. The complete absence of snow traces, combined with terrain where wind erased scents and signs within hours, was logged in the end-of-day report as a serious impediment, forcing command to consider alternative search approaches rather than continuing to rely solely on standard lost-person movement models in Glacier National Park's deep snow environment. In the consolidated report dated December 7, 2011, after 3 days of expanded searching with no traces recovered, SAR Command in the analysis section began re-evaluating all collected data to construct three primary hypothesis groups to explain the disappearance of Ethan Cole, Marissa Hale, and Joshua Rennick. The first hypothesis focused on the possibility that the three encountered an accident while traversing an area with seasonal crevasses or ice cracks. This is a common cause of winter disappearances in Glacier, especially in thin ice zones, forming early in the cold season. Based on 2011 geological maps and on-site observations, the dedicated crevasse team inspected over 40 crevasses within a few miles of the abandoned snowmobiles. Short-range ice-penetrating radar, tethered cameras, and vibration sensors were lowered into major cracks, while smaller ones were probed with poles and fiber optic cameras. However, all results showed intact ice layers, no signs of collapse or fresh fractures, and no foreign objects trapped beneath. Ice edges lacked debris or snow piles, typically left when a heavy mass falls in. The report concluded that if a crevasse fall accident had occurred, there would be surface cracks or subsidence signs, but no such evidence existed in the field, leaving this hypothesis unsupported, though not absolutely ruled out. The second hypothesis involved an avalanche, a serious risk given rapidly changing weather and fractured steep terrain. Snow measurement station data along Red Eagle Basin for the 3 days before and after the disappearance was analyzed for avalanche potential. Logs showed steady snow accumulation from light snowfall, but no sudden pressure spikes or load changes, two key factors needed for avalanche formation. Terrain scout teams physically checked steep slopes for slide signs, such as torn snow slabs, long run-out paths, or large pulled surface masses. The entire area near the snowmobiles and high-risk zones showed no such indicators. The inspection radius was expanded to include hidden slopes, but low-altitude drone data also recorded no matching avalanche paths by timing. Since avalanches typically leave clear physical signs for days, the absence of any torn snow structures or slide marks led to the assessment that the group being swept into an avalanche lacked foundation. The third hypothesis centered on the group leaving the snowmobiles to seek shelter or an alternate route after encountering adverse weather. This was the only hypothesis allowing the three to have actively departed the vehicles, yet it conflicted with scene reality. If they walked away from the snowmobile position, they would certainly have left footprints, sinkage, or dropped items, especially in the initial phase before snow covered everything. However, repeated checks around the snowmobiles showed undisturbed snow layers with no footprints, drag marks, dropped items, or any disturbance suggesting movement direction. SAR also examined multiple wind-sheltered zones, where snow would take longer to erase signs, but still found no human evidence. Compressed snow patches did not match boot or snowmobile boot print sizes, aligning better with wind or large animal impacts. Notably, all scene data, including snow shapes, wind directions, snow depths, and trace bearing rates, indicated that if the three had left the vehicles within 1-2 hours before fresh snow fell, at least some physical signs should have remained, yet Sayre found none, even after expanding the sweep area. When all three most plausible hypotheses lacked support from any field evidence or physical traces, the Sayre Command's consolidated report concluded that none of them had sufficient basis to explain the group's disappearance based on data collected to that point. The total absence of physical signs in the snowmobile area and the entire 15 square miles swept zone was deemed an extremely rare anomaly, disrupting the ability to reconstruct the incident sequence and creating severe difficulties for subsequent analysis. It was precisely in the context where all initial approaches had reached dead ends that the scene analysis team returned to re-examine the entire snowmobile area on December 8, 2011, and began documenting a series of highly anomalous details, traces that did not match any of the accident hypotheses previously considered and were also incompatible with typical winter disappearance patterns in Glacier. Most notably, one of the three snowmobiles, the one positioned farthest southeast, showed signs of having been moved after the engine was shut off, with a drag mark approximately 3 meters long that left a deep groove in the underlying old snow layer, while the other two snowmobiles remained stably positioned with no signs of sliding or external force impact. Compression samples from the snow beneath the dragged vehicle indicated a weight application inconsistent with a person's self-propelled effort, and the drag direction did not align with the prevailing strong wind direction at the estimated time. This was the first clearly documented anomaly indicating external force intervention that did not fit the natural movement model of the missing group. In the northern area with the strongest wind scouring, the analysis team observed an unusually long and wide compressed snow band offset from any snowmobile path if the group had passed through that zone. Based on depth measurements and pressure distribution, this snow band contained numerous small discrete pressure points inconsistent with the number of footsteps or weight from three people. The compressed area size was far larger than what a group of three could produce in the same time frame. Terrain specialists noted that this pressure distribution did not match patterns left by large animals such as moose or mountain goats, which typically leave clear hoof marks at the edges of compressed zones. The absence of any hoof shapes and the uniformity of pressure across the snow surface suggested this structure was created by a large object or multiple contact points beyond human, yet not uniform enough to infer wheeled or tracked vehicles. On the northeast-facing slope, where low-altitude drones had recorded data during the second search day, the analysis team discovered a wide slide mark extending approximately 12 meters, with no shape compatible with a snowmobile track. The snow surface was sheared across a width greater than that of a standard snowmobile, and the underlying compressed snow layers showed varying pressure levels inconsistent with continuous snowmobile travel. This slide mark also lacked a clear entry point or starting origin, an uncommon feature if it resulted from an object sliding down from higher elevation. When cross-referenced against the park's historical data samples, the analysis team concluded it did not match any permitted or previously recorded legal vehicle type in the area. However, the formation timing could not be determined because wind had blurred surface features. Parallel to these anomalous traces, park management received 2 independent reports from 2 different visitor groups about sighting a silver Honda CR-V appearing near the restricted Northeast Glacier Zone within the 2 days prior to the trio's disappearance. The first report came from an amateur ski group operating near the 2 Medicine boundary, who noted a silver CR-V parked several hundred meters from the restricted area under conditions with no legal motorized access route. The second report came from a couple snowshoeing on December 2nd, who saw a vehicle matching the description stopped at a higher elevation on a snowflat with unusually deep tire marks. Both groups provided their information after SAR had been activated, and although the observation times did not coincide, the vehicle descriptions matched remarkably. At this point, SAR had already located a silver Honda CR-V near the abandoned snowmobile site, but no verified information existed regarding the vehicle's owner, arrival time, or direct connection to the missing group. Although this data prompted the analysis team to expand cross-referencing scope, the independent witness reports still fell short of criteria to conclude external human involvement at the scene. Neither report included photos, video, or license plate numbers, and winter weather could distort color or vehicle type perception. When synthesizing the four anomalies, the unexplained snowmobile drag mark, the compressed snow band incompatible with the number of missing persons, the wide slide mark, not attributable to any known vehicle, and the two independent reports of a silver Honda CR-V near the restricted zone. The SAR analysis team recorded this as a highly suspicious cluster of anomalies, yet still insufficient to open a federal criminal investigation per regulations. The primary reason cited was that all traces lacked verifiable formation timing, could not be directly linked to the group's disappearance, and lacked physical proof of an additional individual's presence or actions beyond the trio. SAR continued under search and rescue protocol, and these anomalies were categorized under data requiring cross-reference upon further information, rather than grounds for transferring to criminal investigation. After all, anomalies at the snowmobile scene failed to yield additional discoveries, and the expanded search radius had covered the entire area assessed as possible traversal by the missing group. Glacier National Park SAR Command, in coordination with NPS representatives and Glacier County Investigative Division, decided to terminate active search operations on December 13, 2011, 10 days after the group's last recorded signal. This decision was based on consolidated reports from all teams: no movement signs, no personal items, no evidence tied to crevasse accident, avalanche, or shelter-seeking attempts. Continuous deteriorating weather during search days, strong winds and fresh snow progressively reduced terrain sweep effectiveness while increasing safety risks to rescue personnel. In the wrap-up meeting, a preliminary conclusion report was drafted using the standard winter disappearance risk assessment model. The event was classified as missing due to environmental factors or undetermined accident. The lack of physical traces leading to this conclusion reflected information limitations rather than a definitive cause. However, given that all three group members vanished in an area with severe winter conditions, showing no signs of movement or shelter-seeking, management was required to apply the next administrative procedure: reclassify the case as presumed dead, accidental, presuming death by some form of accident or environmental exposure, despite no bodies or physical evidence. This is standard protocol for prolonged disappearances in Glacier, where recovery rates of bodies in deep winter are very low and long-term burial under snow or ice is highly likely. After reclassification, related park areas had restrictions lifted, SAR withdrew from the scene, and only passive monitoring based on visitor or patrolling ranger reports remained. The missing group's snowmobile equipment was transported to storage as evidence, and all items found in the area, regardless of undetermined relevance, were logged for long-term cross-reference. From 2012 to 2016, Glacier National Park recorded a total of 6 isolated visitor reports of unusual snow subsidence, wind-exposed obstacles, or apparent signs related to the 2011 disappearance. However, all were checked per procedure and quickly ruled out due to lack of physical evidence, no human signs, or confusion with common wind pockets in winter. A notable 2013 report of a metallic object protruding from snow near Red Eagle Basin Valley was investigated, but turned out to be an old snowmobile frame fragment buried for years. Subsequent reports, including one describing moving lights at night and one noting strange sounds, yielded no specific findings and failed to meet criteria for reopening. In every case, Glacier Rangers filed reports, recorded coordinates, took photos, and cross-checked with weather data, but never located human traces or any items directly linked to Ethan, Marissa, or Joshua. The federal missing persons system also recorded no post-December 3, 2011 financial activity, travel, or identification used by any of the three, reinforcing the presumption of accidental disappearance rather than intentional departure from society. Throughout 2012-2016, families of the three victims repeatedly provided information or requested ranger review of leads received from acquaintances or visitors, but none had sufficient basis to reopen investigation. Some independent experts were invited to review 2011 scene photos, but found no anomalies strong enough to overturn the preliminary conclusion. As a result, the disappearance file for Ethan Cole, Marissa Hale, and Joshua Rennick was moved to cold case status, long-term archived and reactivatable only upon new physical evidence. Within Glacier's management system, the case quickly became a rare outlier. 3 people vanished completely, despite intact snowmobiles at the scene, no exit signs, no evidence, and no determinable direction of travel, leaving a data void that 2011 investigative capabilities could not overcome. The file remained closed in that state for years until an unforeseen event occurred. On April 12, 2017, during a routine U.S. Geological Survey monitoring trip on Red Eagle Glacier to measure early season melt rates, an engineering team recorded an anomalous structure protruding from the gradually receding ice layer. While capturing high-resolution camera footage, they spotted a dark wooden section exposed at the edge of a large crack on the glacier's southeast rim, an area with no prior record of winter shelters, research facilities, or man-made structures. Recognizing features inconsistent with natural terrain, the USGS team approached at safe distance, used ice surface stability measurement equipment, and then removed a portion of overlying snow for clearer observation. As they expanded the area, they found a flat wooden face, showing signs of fixed construction rather than driftwood. When additional large ice chunks melted away, an angled wooden roof corner emerged, confirming this was a wooden cabin buried under the glacier from an undetermined time. The appearance of a cabin in a location only accessible by winter snow routes prompted the USGS team to immediately report to National Park Service management while cordoning off the area due to ice collapse risk. When rangers and terrain survey specialists arrived, they continued widening the entry by digging snow and clearing cracked ice, exposing a deformed wooden door. From outside, the cabin interior appeared complete darkness, but wall and ceiling structures indicated it had once been a small cabin, possibly placed there before the 2011 disappearance. When the ranger team opened the door and shone lights inside, they noted partial cabin collapse from ice pressure, but the rear corner retained a large enough void for a person to shelter. At that moment, they heard a faint sound from within. Shining lights closer, they discovered an extremely emaciated, severely dehydrated man curled in the intact corner of the cabin. They immediately requested medical support, and after safely extracting the victim per protocol, preliminary identification matching, and finding inside the cabin a fabric scrap bearing markings similar to Ethan Cole's 2011 jacket, confirmed biological features aligned with Ethan's records. This was the first time since the 2011 disappearance that one of the three was located and alive. Though partially collapsed, the cabin still contained rudimentary items such as plastic buckets, metal cans, worn rope, and a wooden bed corner. Some items showed signs of long-term use, far beyond temporary shelter conditions. The victim was conscious, but unable to stand steadily, with slurred speech and clear signs of prolonged debilitation. After helicopter transport to St. Patrick Hospital in Missoula, the federal investigative team's first step was identity verification using standard identification methods. Fingerprints were scanned and matched against 2011 missing persons records, resulting in a match to Ethan's identity. Concurrently, a buccal swab DNA sample was sent to the FBI laboratory in Quantico for secondary confirmation to ensure absolute accuracy in a prolonged missing persons case. DNA results confirmed 100% identity match, completely ruling out misidentification or impersonation. After identity confirmation, medical teams began comprehensive health assessment to determine injury extent and duration. Malnutrition was recorded as severe. BMI dropped over 30% from 2011 records, with prolonged protein deficiency signs, muscle mass loss, and friction-induced skin inflammation. Ethan's body temperature was unstable, with poor thermoregulation indicating long-term cold environment living without stable heating. Dermatological exam noted numerous faint indentations around wrists and ankles, no longer open wounds, but deep enough to conclude repeated tight binding over extended periods. These marks aligned with common positions for rope or nylon cord restraints, with formation timing estimated over multiple years based on scar tissue layering and tissue stratification. Ophthalmological exam showed narrowed light reflex and signs, consistent with prolonged low natural light living. Ethan also exhibited temporary vision reduction upon bright light exposure, noted as a common consequence of confinement in dim environments. Musculoskeletal exam revealed restricted movement traces, lower limb muscle atrophy, reduced load-bearing capacity, and loss of balance when standing. Physicians concluded this condition could not arise short-term, but required many years. Investigative agencies collected additional biological evidence from hair and fingernails. Initial results showed months of micronutrient deficiency, along with cyclical physiological stress markers. As Ethan gradually regained alertness after 48 hours of fluid replacement and thermal stabilization, the FBI team, coordinated with trauma memory specialists, conducted limited information gathering sessions to avoid panic or psychological harm. Ethan could only provide fragmented memory pieces, steady mechanical sounds like a generator running, rotting wood smell, dim light like a small lamp, and a sensation of cramped cabin confines. These fragmented memories were recorded and tentatively mapped for cross-reference with the ice-buried cabin scene. Due to nervous system impact from prolonged malnutrition, Ethan struggled to form continuous event sequences, recalling only disjointed, non-chronologically linked moments. Specialists concluded this as typical memory distortion in long-term confinement victims, where the brain prioritizes sensory over sequential memory. Each information session was audio recorded and coded for later analysis, combined with health records and cabin evidence to build initial assumptions about manner, timing, and conditions of Ethan's captivity. By the end of the first treatment week, preliminary medical reports affirmed that all bodily traces on Ethan, including cold injuries, malnutrition, binding marks, and light deprivation effects, indicated prolonged strict control living, fully ruling out solitary survival or temporary natural shelter. This became critical grounds for the FBI to officially reclassify the case as prolonged unlawful confinement and transfer the entire file to federal criminal investigation. Immediately after medical reports confirmed Ethan Cole exhibited prolonged captivity signs with no capacity for independent survival in the natural environment over 6 years, the FBI officially reactivated the 2011 Glacier file and shifted it from accidental disappearance to federal criminal investigation. A special task force was formed, including terrain analysis experts, glaciologists, cold environment forensics teams, and satellite data analysts. The first objective was to precisely locate the cabin buried under Red Eagle Glacier and assess how it existed in an area with no recorded structures in park records. The entire 2011 SARA file, including sweep maps, scene photos, meteorological logs, patrol journals, and witness statements, was redigitized and integrated into 2017 spatial analysis systems, enabling detection of subtle variation patterns missed by older technology. The FBI satellite team, in coordination with USGS, reviewed seasonal image sequences from 2011 to 2017, focusing on surface changes at Red Eagle Basin. Multispectral image comparisons revealed a small thermal anomaly in winter 2011 at the cabin discovery site, unmarked in original records, because it fell outside the primary search corridor. From 2012 onward, this anomaly faded and vanished entirely as the glacier expanded cyclically. However, Cloud-penetrating radar image analysis showed the ice zone containing the cabin had a density structure characteristic of a solid object buried inside, forming a distinct reflection point persisting for years, but unnoticed because it aligned with natural melt signal paths. Cross-referencing with late winter 2017 low snow photos, when ice had receded deeply, the investigative team determined the cabin had likely existed at that location at least since late 2011. For confirmation, the FBI employed high-resolution LiDAR scanning, allowing virtual removal of snow and ice layers in 3D models to reveal underlying structures. LiDAR data showed the cabin originally had a rectangular shape, small size, sloped roof, and matched types of quickly erected wooden cabins suited to harsh weather. This structure could not have drifted with glacial flow, implying it was deliberately fixed on the ground before being buried by glacier advance. Combining this with 6-year glacier movement graphs, the analysis team determined the cabin was gradually buried at an average rate, exceeding 30 centimeters per season, allowing inference that partial collapse resulted from ice pressure rather than human action. After completing spatial dimway, the FBI zoned Red Eagle Basin for criminal investigation priorities. The area was divided into 3 main subzones. Subzone A, the 2-mile radius around the cabin, highest probability for holding supply or perpetrator movement traces. Subzone B, access routes to the cabin during the period before full glacial burial. And Subzone C, natural observation points or locations the perpetrator could have used to monitor snowmobile activity along the 2 Medicine route. The investigative team re-evaluated all original 2011 SR data, particularly previously unexplained anomalies. The snowmobile drag mark, compressed snow inconsistent with missing persons count, wide slide mark, not attributable to group vehicles, and silver Honda CR-V appearances in restricted zones. When overlaid on the newly digitized map, several anomalies began forming intersecting lines with Subzone B, potential routes for another vehicle into the glacier area before full cabin burial. Digitized terrain maps also highlighted natural depressions connecting 2 Medicine to Red Eagle Basin rim, points traversable by wheeled vehicle in winter if unchecked by rangers. These routes, previously excluded in SR as too difficult for snowmobiles, now became investigation focal points because the cabin was determined not random shelter, but intentionally constructed. From initial analyses, the FBI reconstructed hypothetical timelines for cabin use, potential access routes, and periods of partial glacial burial. The reactivation objective was not only cabin location, but how it existed, how it was accessed, and who could have built it in a no-construction zone. Integrating all data, Red Eagle Basin was officially designated a federal high-priority investigation area, with all access routes from 2 Medicine and Cutbank placed under detailed sweep scope in the next investigative phase. When the area around Red Eagle Glacier was cordoned off and specialized teams could safely access the cabin after the ice was cleared, the FBI and Cold Environment Forensics team began a comprehensive scene examination, treating it as the central focus of the investigation. Although partially crushed by the glacier, the cabin retained enough structural integrity to allow reconstruction of its overall layout. Surveys showed the cabin was rectangular, approximately 7.5 meters long and 4 meters wide, divided into 3 small adjacent confinement cells at the rear and 1 larger front compartment serving as a living or observation area. The confinement cells were roughly equal in size, each just large enough for a crude wooden bed and a metal bucket for water or waste. The cabin walls were made of thick pine planks, many machine-sanded smooth rather than scavenged forest material. This indicated planned and premeditated construction. The sole entrance was on the west side, a thick wooden door nearly 8 centimeters deep, fitted with a homemade mechanical locking system, consisting of a sliding steel bar and a padlock drilled directly into the frame, operable only from the outside. Wear marks around the hinges showed the door had been opened and closed hundreds of times over years, but no signs of forced entry from inside. In the northeast corner sat a heavily reinforced wooden platform holding an old gasoline-powered generator. A small exhaust pipe ran through the wall, neatly sealed with insulation. Nearby was a shelf with numerous empty plastic fuel cans. Residual gasoline traces indicated regular periodic resupply. The generator's presence explained the steady mechanical sound Ethan recalled, and its operating duration, based on soot buildup, showed continuous use over many years, not temporary shelter. During the cabin sweep, the forensics team collected a total of 174 evidence items: fingerprints on worn wood surfaces and door hinges, fabric fibers caught on wall hooks, hair samples from the confinement cells, and floor wear patterns reflecting repeated bed and item movement. Samples were categorized on-site to prevent damage from melting ice. In the first confinement cell, where Ethan was found, forensics noted old blankets and small scratch marks on the wall surface, possibly from fingernails during extreme debilitation. But the more significant discovery was in the second cell. Beneath a thin ice layer, they found a nearly intact human skeleton pressed into the corner by ice and time. The skeleton was identified as female, age consistent with Marissa Hale. Based on decomposition level and residual soft tissue shrinkage, forensics estimated time of death around 2013. Next to the remains was a metal bracelet matching one described by Marissa's family in the missing persons file. After clearing ice from the third cell, a second body was revealed, this one retaining more soft tissue, indicating later death. Decomposition patterns matched death in 2016, and subsequent identification confirmed it as Joshua Rennick. Josh's body lay close to the wooden bed, legs drawn up, showing signs of prolonged emaciation and cold injury. Based on posture and skeletal condition, forensics concluded the victim had been unable to move for many weeks before death. These discoveries confirmed the cabin as the site of long-term confinement and the place where two of the group died under conditions of no care, no escape, and complete isolation. Outside the confinement area, forensics found numerous details supporting systematic cabin maintenance. One corner held small wooden crates with clean knife cuts. Remnants of torn food packaging remained inside. Wax paper food wrappers showed consistent resupply cycles, with identical cut patterns from the same blade style. At the generator corner, forensics measured layered soot deposits and identified regular accumulation patterns. Every few weeks a new soot layer covered the old, forming characteristic wave marks. This pattern allowed experts to determine the cabin received fuel on a fairly stable cycle over many years without interruption, except toward the end, when partial collapse occurred, coinciding with Ethan's severe debilitation. Another find involved rusted mechanical tools near the generator: hammer, wrench, pliers, screwdriver, all showing uniform wear indicating long-term use by one person to maintain cabin operations. These tools lacked common brand markings, suggesting purchase from small local stores or piecemeal collection. At the cabin entrance, forensics located groundware, a depression sized to fit a supply crate or large fuel drum, supporting the assumption the perpetrator accessed the cabin via the same route for years. Performed fixed-cycle resupply. No clear tire tracks remained due to ice cover, but depressions in the frozen subsoil indicated mechanical vehicle resupply. When all data was combined, it led to one key conclusion: the cabin was not temporary shelter, but a deliberately constructed confinement facility, maintained and operated by an individual with mechanical skills and knowledge of extreme cold conditions. The outward-only locking system, sealed confinement cells, regular resupply cycle, and the cabin's existence in an unrecorded park location indicated years-long highly secretive behavior. The two bodies found inside, together with Ethan Cole's condition upon rescue, provided clear evidence that all three victims had been long-term captives in this structure, with the cabin central to the entire criminal sequence. After completing cabin examination and collecting all samples, the FBI forensics analysis team began reconstructing the full confinement timeline from 2011 to Ethan Cole's discovery in April 2017. This critical step aimed not only to establish when victims were brought to the cabin, but also to assess perpetrator behavior, operational cycles, and control level over many years. To rebuild the timeline, investigators used 4 key data sources: remaining cabin items, leftover food and packaging, generator and equipment repair marks, and wall tally scratches in confinement cells, many matching time-marking patterns. From these, they pieced together a continuous event sequence reflected by the cabin. First, all data indicated the 3 victims were brought to the cabin very close to their disappearance date. No overt coercion signs appeared on the snowmobiles, but tally scratches in the first cell, identified as Ethan's, began around mid-December 2011, based on scratch rate and wood corrosion in cold conditions. This allowed the inference that the group was confined within days of going missing. Tally marks in Marissa's and Josh's cells showed the same starting period, reinforcing that all 3 were brought in simultaneously rather than sequentially. The early phase from late 2011 to mid-2013 was evident in cabin items and fuel consumption for the generator. Layered exhaust soot showed steady generator operation with refueling cycles of about 6-8 weeks. Cabin lighting equipment displayed continuous use marks for the first 2 years. Food packaging also reflected highly stable supply during this period, with relatively low but life-sustaining calorie levels under restriction. Tally marks in Marissa's cell stopped in mid-2013. This was key data, matching forensics' estimated time of death from her remains. Leftover food in her cell showed gradually declining consumption before death. Final faint marks in her cell indicated disrupted cycles, possibly corresponding to severe health decline. After that point, her cell showed no further wear or disturbance, indicating continued occupancy. This confirmed Marissa died in the cabin around 2013, and her body remained in the cell until discovery. Meanwhile, Josh's cell reflected longer duration. Time-marking scratches continued steadily into mid-2016, consistent with forensics' death estimate for Josh. The wooden floor in his cell had unusual wear patterns, suggesting he may have attempted movement or position changes as health deteriorated. Leftover food in this area was lower than others, possibly due to gradually reduced rations or Josh's reduced ability to consume before death. These signs reinforced that during 2014-2016, the cabin continued to be maintained and resupplied, allowing survival for years after Marissa. Forensics also noted faster soot accumulation during this period, indicating possible generator instability requiring frequent repairs. Scattered mechanical tools in the cabin showed wear corresponding to this time frame. Ethan's data showed continuous tally scratches from 2011 through late 2016. The final phase had irregular, uneven deep marks, indicating progressive debilitation. Some wall sections had scribbled writing. Forensics interpreted as reflecting cognitive disturbance, all aligned with Ethan's medical records upon discovery. Beyond tally marks, investigators used 6 years of weather data to determine perpetrator access rhythm to the cabin. 2011-2013 saw slow glacier retreat, allowing access from the eastern slope with lower, less ice-covered terrain. This explained regular early resupply cycles. From 2014 to 2015, rapid ice buildup occurred due to harsh winters recorded in climatology data. Yet generator soot still showed access, though more difficult, during brief stable weather windows. This appeared in irregular but sufficient fuel consumption to keep the cabin running. By late 2016 and early 2017, meteorological data showed abnormal glacier expansion, partly from years of accumulated pressure. The cabin was structurally displaced, causing partial north wall collapse and door system damage. This marked the complete end of resupply traces, coinciding with Josh's death, and Ethan left without heat maintenance. Ice modeling showed the cabin became nearly inaccessible on foot by early 2017. These factors created a void period in which Ethan was likely abandoned, leading to severe debilitation before discovery. Combining all data, food packaging, generator, soot layers, wall tallies, mechanical repair marks, and ice progression, Forensics reconstructed a closed timeline, 2011. 3 victims captured and placed in cabin, 2013. Marissa dies, 2014. 2016. Cabin continues maintenance. Josh dies, 2016. 2017. Partial glacier collapse. Resupply ends. Ethan debilitates and survives in intact compartment until USGS discovery. This timeline became the foundation for FBI assessment of perpetrator control level, cabin operation, timing, and overall 6-year criminal sequence milestones. Once the 2011-2017 confinement timeline was fully reconstructed and the cabin established as the central crime scene, the FBI turned to the pivotal question: who could access the remote Red Eagle Basin area for many consecutive years with sufficient capability to maintain a generator-powered confinement facility and suitable means to transport supplies through complex winter terrain? The first lead circled back to the 2011 SR file. The reported appearance of a silver Honda CR-V in the restricted zone by 2 separate visitor groups at different times, and the discovery of an unclaimed silver CR-V parked near the abandoned snowmobile site. Though previously flagged as unverified, with the cabin now located and deliberate behavior pattern established, the CR-V became the investigation focus. The forensics team re-examined all scene photos taken December 5, 2011. Among stored images, 3 captured snow compression marks at the snowmobile area edge. At the time, SR lacked conditions for analysis due to snow cover, but 2017 technology enabled contrast enhancement and compression pattern reconstruction. When processed with tire tread analysis software, researchers identified a symmetrical tread pattern size to match all-season tires used on 2008-2011 Honda CR-V models. Tread marks were insufficient for exact model identification, but central groove shape and edge spacing matched product ranges from 3 major brands equipping CR-Vs at that time. More importantly, when these compression samples were compared to depressions in front of the cabin, identified as supply or fuel drum placement spots, forensics found identical pressure distribution patterns, suggesting the same vehicle type approached the cabin multiple times before glacial burial. Though no license plate could be identified, the presence of matching tread styles at 2 sites miles apart provided strong grounds to trace the vehicle. The FBI compiled a list of all silver Honda CR-Vs, 2008-2011 models, registered in counties bordering Glacier, expanding the search radius to all of Montana and parts of Idaho. Over 170 vehicles total, but filtering for frequent winter travel and owners with addresses tied to remote routes near 2 Medicine reduced the list to 19. Investigators further narrowed by reviewing automated license plate reader data at park entry-exit points, though coverage was incomplete in 2011. Fragmented records showed a silver CR-V near Cut Bank in subsequent years. Data was insufficient to confirm the same vehicle, but enough to shrink the list to 4 owners with anomalous movement patterns. The FBI conducted elimination checks on each. First owner, a family from Kalispell. No one matched skill or circumstance for Red Eagle Basin winter access. Their tires did not match scene patterns. Second owner, a postal service worker with fixed delivery routes, location proof during disappearance, and no glacier ties 2011-2017. Third owner, a retiree lacking survival or mechanical skills, vehicle confirmed with entirely different tire system. This led to the final name among the 4, Lucas Branner. Lucas Branner, 38 in 2011, was formerly a medical program student in Missoula, but suspended and expelled for ethics violations and unstable lab behavior. Records showed Branner left Missoula and moved near East Glacier in 2010, renting a small unregistered cabin appearing only on utility bills. Notably, Branner owned a 2009 silver Honda CR-V registered in Flathead County. Vehicle repair records revealed Branner replaced 2 tires in November 2011, immediately before the disappearance. The replacement tire type matched scene compression patterns. When cabin fingerprints were compared to criminal and civil databases, a match appeared. Branner's prints were on file from his medical program lab access requirement. A partial fingerprint on the wooden bed frame in cell 2 matched 13 points to Branner's, sufficient for presence confirmation. Additionally, partial matching prints from a screwdriver handle near the generator linked him directly to cabin maintenance equipment. Medical school records from Branner's former institution showed basic anatomical knowledge, explaining certain wound care and minimal medical items in the cabin. The combination of fingerprints, geographic access, suitable vehicle, residence history bordering Glacier, and past behavioral irregularities quickly made Branner the central suspect. Expanded investigation into his finances and activities, 2011-2016, revealed near total isolation, minimal social interaction, and regular small-quantity winter supply purchases from local stores, including small can fuel, rope, screws, and generator batteries. All such items appeared in the cabin. This spending pattern did not match typical isolated living, but aligned with periodic maintenance of a separate facility. Converging evidence repeatedly pointed to one individual. By the end of the review phase, Branner was identified as the sole suspect with means, opportunity, basic skills, and residency history, allowing access to Red Eagle Basin throughout the cabin's operational period, while also being the only CRV owner with matching cabin fingerprints, making him the FBI's primary official investigation target. Combining forensic data obtained inside the cabin, simulation of the ice terrain, and Ethan's initial statements, investigators were able to construct a mechanism of escape from the place of confinement that had previously been considered impossible under the natural conditions of Red Eagle Basin. Records of abandoned supplies, the sudden interruption of the fuel cycle, and signs of incomplete repairs around the generator area indicate that the cabin lost its supply chain abruptly around late March 2017, coinciding with the final seasonal blizzard that triggered hazard warnings for eastern access routes to Glacier. Based on analysis of vehicle tracks around the cabin, the FBI concluded that the perpetrator most likely suffered an accident either while approaching or leaving the cabin, resulting in the complete termination of the supply and control chain. In the conditions of the abandoned cabin, USGS ice stability sensors showed that over the following 10-15 days, the cyclical spring thaw process caused significant deformation to the ice layer surrounding the structure, producing 3 main fracture lines. One of these fractures ran along the north wall, directly behind the detention room where Ethan was held. When interviewed, Ethan stated that right from the moment the cabin lost power and the familiar generator sound ceased, he clearly noticed changes in air temperature and the movement sounds of the ice, especially the sporadic cracking noises coming from behind the old wooden wall panel. Forensic analysis confirmed that this wall area had been under strong compression for many years, and that even a small change in ice pressure was sufficient to create a gap. Ethan described feeling an unusual cold airflow entering after a portion of the wall panel buckled inward. Over many days, he used broken wood fragments in the room, combined with his own body force, to pry the crack wider. Analysis of the fracture marks on the wall showed expansion patterns matching internal applied force, confirming his account. Once the gap was wide enough to squeeze through, Ethan exited behind the cabin, where the ice space had been depleted of water, creating a void that allowed him to reach an inclined ice cavity leading to the surface. Due to years of confinement under limited light conditions, Ethan had almost completely lost his sense of direction. He crawled out of the cabin area as dusk approached, while the melting ice deformed the ground and created numerous small fissures. Forensic records noted meandering movement trails 200-300 meters from the cabin, believed to represent Ethan's initial journey in a state of exhaustion and sensory disorientation. He reported losing all sense of time, only recalling that he traveled for many hours in low temperatures, repeatedly falling due to patchy melting snow. During the ice melt survey on April 12, 2017, the USGS team detected anomalous movement via thermal camera while flying low near the edge of Red Eagle Glacier. A weak thermal signature emanated from a human-shaped form, partially lying on the snow. Upon approach, they found Ethan in severe hypothermia, with torn clothing, bruised extremities, and serious dehydration. The USGS trajectory map confirmed the discovery location was approximately 1.1 miles from the cabin as the crow flies, aligning with the only feasible escape direction permitted by the terrain. All evidence, the cabin's loss of supply due to the perpetrator's accident, ice melt causing wall fracture, Ethan's exploitation of the crack to escape, followed by disorientation until USGS detection, is consistent, allowing the establishment of a passive yet terrain and context-appropriate escape model fitting the early April 2017 cabin and surrounding conditions. Immediately after establishing Ethan's escape mechanism and consolidating the chain of evidence linking the cabin to Lucas Branner, the FBI coordinated with NPS tactical teams and U.S. Marshals to launch a manhunt operation along the eastern edge of Glacier, focusing on terrain routes that an injured individual or one without a vehicle could still traverse. The drone team previously used for ice mapping was redeployed to the area to search for signs of the silver Honda CR-V that Branner had used for many years. During a sweep flight over a collapsed ice zone near Bowman's Coulee, a drone detected a metallic shape partially protruding from thick compacted snow, with structure and reflective color consistent with a 2009 CR-V body. When zoomed in via high-resolution camera, the control team recognized that the vehicle's rear had shattered glass, while the front was deeply buried after sliding down an ice embankment. This was the first evidence indicating Branner may have suffered an accident exactly as the forensic model predicted. The FBI marked the coordinates and deployed a ground approach team, but the terrain around the vehicle was too hazardous for immediate direct inspection. Instead, they extracted fresh compression marks around the area using a depth-sensing drone, detecting a series of small drag trails heading northeast, consistent with limping footprints from one person dragging a light object. These trails did not exist in scans from 48 hours earlier, proving the movement was very recent. Based on the direction of travel and spacing between marks, the pursuit team modeled a plausible route and estimated Branner was injured, most likely in his left leg. The pursuit was launched the same day, divided into 3 teams to cut off the suspect's escape routes, while additional low-altitude drones scanned the brush areas. By late afternoon, a drone detected a small object erected amid a rocky snowfield, a one-person emergency tent, typically used for extended cold terrain travel. Thermal camera showed a weak, irregularly fluctuating body heat source inside. The tactical team was dispatched using high-risk containment tactics, with one group circling behind to avoid distant visual detection. Upon breach, they found Lucas Branner curled up in a sleeping bag, left leg crudely bandaged with torn jacket fabric, face pale and showing severe dehydration signs. Next to the tent was a large backpack containing items that immediately strengthened the prosecution file. A nylon-wrapped notebook detailing supply dates, cabin generator fuel consumption, generator repair counts, notes on silent cycles, corresponding to periods when victims were restrained long-term. A Red Eagle Basin topographic map marking 2 secret access routes to the cabin, with annotations for winter supply drop points. A lock-picking toolkit, including pliers, homemade handcuffs, anchor screws, zip ties, and devices for which forensic had found replicas or usage traces in the cabin. Also in the backpack, investigators recovered 2 memory cards, likely containing surveillance data or personal logs. They were sealed on-site. Branner's notebook was particularly critical. Beyond recording supply cycles, it featured symbols matching forensic timelines in the cabin, enabling direct cross-referencing between the perpetrator's actions and victim living conditions over 6 years. The supply map matched tire tracks previously recorded around the cabin and the CR-V route noted in 2011. All this evidence, combined with Branner's arrest just a few miles from the cabin and the crashed CR-V nearby, formed a complete, consistent, and objective chain of linkage, elevating the investigation file from suspicion to direct evidence, ready for federal prosecution phase. Immediately after Lucas Branner was extracted from the mountain area, and transferred to federal temporary detention in Helena. The FBI investigative team, including behavioral analysts, lead case investigators, and forensic psychiatrists specializing in cognitive capacity assessment, began establishing an interrogation strategy based on the prolonged isolation offender model. Behavioral analysis focused on three clear pillars evident in the cabin: absolute isolation mechanism, continuous control pattern, and a living structure designed to eliminate spatial and temporal awareness. Cross-referencing with notations in the seized tent notebook, the analysis team determined Branner operated the cabin on 10 14-day cycles in winter and 7 9-day cycles in summer, consistent with generator fuel depletion levels forensic identified from oil residue samples. Each supply visit was logged with coded symbols, but these symbols matched periods when the cabin showed repair or lock system adjustment signs, indicating the perpetrator maintained a regular, calculated routine rather than impulsive behavior. During interrogation, Branner initially appeared disoriented, slow to respond, and repeatedly claimed he remembered nothing after the accident, but independent psychological evaluation showed he possessed full cognitive capacity, no acute psychosis, though with prolonged anxiety and insomnia. The investigative team employed a time fragmentation tactic, presenting forensic details separately to force the suspect to confront irrefutable evidence. When confronted with fingerprint evidence on the bed frame, matched to a reconstructed cabin position, Branner did not deny presence, but claimed the cabin belonged to someone else. However, when questioned about the supply map symbols matching trails he himself had scraped into the cabin's wooden surface, Branner displayed clear stress, altered breathing, and persistent rightward gaze avoidance, a behavioral cue noted as evasion when facing truth. Another turning point came when investigators presented the forensic reconstructed detention timeline, markers for 2011, 2013, 2016, 2017. These were illustrated with physical evidence, expired food packages from corresponding years, generator repair marks, time notches carved on wall in room 2, and wear patterns on handcuffs in room 3. When shown photos of notches matching Marissa's death period, Branner reacted unexpectedly. He attempted deflection, saying the notches were self-carved by them. But forensic proved carving depth matched a small knife recovered from Branner's seized backpack. This cross-match rendered the suspect's denial tactic ineffective. Continuing exploitation, investigators used a behavioral blind spot tactic, posing questions requiring confirmation of details only the cabin operator would know, such as generator oil change cycles, room pressure, balancing to prevent ice cracking, or disguised ventilation pipe locations under snow. Initially, Branner refused to answer, but he unconsciously nodded when hearing an accurate recreation of the refueling procedure, forensic reconstructed, inadvertently confirming his direct role. By the end of the fourth day's interrogation session, when the team presented fiber matches between handcuff material and Branner's work jacket, the suspect ceased denial and shifted to a justification pattern, stating he didn't intend to kill them, only wanted to keep them because they knew too much about my route. This statement, though not a full confession, provided important indirect evidence for establishing Branner's motive and responsibility across all 3 detention phases. Cross-referencing his statements with the forensic timeline showed every detail he offered failed to negate physical evidence, while reinforcing that Branner possessed full cognitive capacity throughout the offense period. Once interrogation, crime scene examination, evidence analysis, and detention timeline reconstruction were complete, the FBI moved to the investigative synthesis phase to establish a prosecution-ready evidence package. Primary focus was the cabin, the convergence point of the entire 6-year criminal structure. Forensic proved the cabin was designed by Branner as a specialized detention facility. Double-layer homemade locked doors, isolated escape-proof cells, disguised ventilation system, and generator operation cycles to sustain minimal living conditions while denying victims light or open space access. Every detail, from fingerprints, DNA, fibers, tool wear marks, to wall structure, confirmed the cabin was not an incidental shelter, but a continuously operated Branner-built project for unlawful detention. Discovery of Marissa Hale and Joshua Rennick's bodies in separate cells showed they died under prolonged restraint, with causes of death consistent with forensic findings, exhaustion, hypothermia, combined with lack of medical care, direct consequences of Branner-controlled detention environment. Body conditions perfectly matched supply timeline in the notebook and cabin deterioration signs at corresponding dates, forming a clear cause-effect chain. Meanwhile, Ethan Cole's survival became the pivotal key, providing witness perspective forensic could not fully reconstruct, separation timing from the group, cabin movement procedures, control patterns, perpetrator appearance cycles, living conditions, and events related to the other two deaths. Though Ethan's memory was fragmented, details matched physical traces, giving his testimony high reliability as the sole living witness in the file. From the cabin, investigation circled back to the related vehicle, the silver Honda CR-V, identified as the only vehicle capable of repeated Red Eagle Basin access over 6 years, and the key transport for all 3 victims in 2011. Discovery of the crashed CR-V near the cabin, matching 2011 compression tire tracks and multi-year supply transport traces, reinforced the vehicle's essential role in the crime. Combined, the FBI established a complete investigative logic chain, one cabin as detention site, containing all physical evidence of restraint, deprivation of liberty, and systematic operation. 2 Marissa and Josh's bodies as proof of death due to detention conditions, not accident, not self-inflicted. 3 Ethan as living witness, confirming detention pattern consistent with full forensic. 4 CR-V as abduction and transport vehicle, present at both 2011 disappearance site and cabin area. 5. Notebook supply map, lock tools, and fingerprints directly linking Branner to every phase. 6. No second suspect or random scenario fit the evidence chain. With overwhelming evidence, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Montana drafted an indictment on 6 felony counts. 1. 3 counts of federal kidnapping for Ethan Cole, Marissa Hale, and Joshua Rennick. 2. 2 counts of kidnapping resulting in death for Marissa and Josh's deaths, carrying maximum penalty of death or life imprisonment. 3. 1 count of unlawful detention and transport across federal lands. The file was presented to the grand jury in Missoula, with all evidence, forensic reports, Ethan's testimony, and cabin examination records. The official investigation conclusion identified Lucas Branner as solely responsible for the entire 6-year criminal sequence, closing the federal investigative phase and laying groundwork for highest-level U.S. criminal prosecution. The federal trial of Lucas Branner began in February 2018 at the U.S. District Court for Montana, based on a 6-count felony indictment. The trial spanned several weeks, centered on 3 main evidence axes: cabin forensics, body forensics, and the 2011-2017 prolonged detention timeline. In the prosecution's presentation, forensic experts described the cabin as a purposefully operated detention facility with double-layer locks, isolated cells, generator repair marks, supply routes, and disguised ventilation, consistent with maintaining minimal victim survival while completely severing external contact. Cabin diagrams were shown to the jury alongside samples including fibers, fingerprints, DNA, lock tool wear, floor drag marks, and door hinge erosion analysis. The prosecution also introduced reports reconstructing cabin thermal light conditions, proving sustained isolation levels. Autopsy forensics for Marissa Hale and Joshua Rennick were presented in separate sessions, focusing on death from prolonged exhaustion, hypothermia, and lack of medical care under forced detention. Forensic pathologists affirmed bone, soft tissue damage, and old restraint marks fully consistent with multi-year detention, ruling out accident or natural death. The 2011-2017 detention timeline, built from physical evidence, wall notches, generator repairs, food decomposition status, and ice analysis, was presented as a continuous sequence with markers aligning with victim deaths and Ethan Cole's survival. The prosecution argued Branner's conduct constituted deliberate long-term detention, premeditated and continuously maintained over 6 years with absolute control and isolation. They used 4 evidence layers to prove intent. 1. The cabin as Branner designed and operated with clear planning. 2. The CRV as victim transport tool, present at both 2011 disappearance and cabin. 3. Supply notebook, transport map and lock tools, showing sustained calculation. 4. Marissa and Josh's deaths as direct consequence of Branner-established detention conditions, not unintended events. The defense focused on its only viable strategy, arguing the defendant's mental capacity. They introduced old academic records from Branner's medical school period, noting unstable behavior and adjustment disorder, and requested expert panel re-evaluation of mental state at time of offense. Branner's attorneys argued the cabin could not be fully viewed as a detention facility due to lacking rational calculation elements, such as no self-safety mechanisms, no fixed supply source, and heavy terrain influence, suggesting disordered conduct questioning purposeful intent. Defense also attempted to hypothesize Marissa and Joshua's deaths as consequences of neglect amid cognitive decline, not intentional detention to death. However, prosecution expert rebuttals quickly undermined this. 3 independent forensic psychiatrists concluded Branner had full cognitive capacity at time of offense. He understood actions, maintained cabin regularly, made calculated decisions like fuel management, supply scheduling, lock replacement, generator repair, and cabin structure adjustments to continue detention. No evidence of psychosis, dementia, or severe cognitive disorder. They affirmed Branner's behavior fit prolonged isolation offender model and did not meet insanity defense standards. Cross-referencing Branner's interrogation statements with forensic timeline, experts noted discrepancies, denials or vagueness were intentional to minimize responsibility, not cognitive impairment. Arguments on Marissa and Josh's deaths were fully rejected when forensic reconstructed supply cycles matching death periods, proving perpetrator could intervene but did not, while maintaining conditions causing death. Ethan's survival also served as strong proof. Old restraint marks, light deprivation damage, malnutrition, and testimony matching forensic showed tight control, no escape opportunity, except ice melt cabin breach, beyond Branner's control. After 15 days of deliberation, the jury found the entire prosecution evidence chain met, beyond a reasonable doubt, standard. Lucas Branner was convicted on all 6 federal counts, 3 kidnapping, 2 kidnapping, resulting in death, and 1 unlawful detention across federal lands. At sentencing, the federal judge imposed double life sentences for the 2 death-resulting counts, plus 60 years for remaining counts, with no possibility of parole, no reduction, no commutation per federal rules, formally closing criminal proceedings for one of Glacier National Park's most serious prolonged detention cases in history. Once Lucas Branner was sentenced and all proceedings concluded, the FBI and NPS conducted an operational after-action review to officially close the Glacier file, focusing on 3 explanatory factor groups for why the case remained undetected for 6 years. First, the detention cabin was in a highly dynamic ice zone, buried under seasonal winter ice accumulation, concealing all surface traces from access paths to vehicle marks from the earliest days post-disappearance. USGS analysis confirmed Red Eagle Glacier alone moved an average 1540 centimeters per month during 2011-2014, sufficient to erase tire tracks, trails, and small structures like cabin vents. Second, 2011 initial SR assessment prioritized traditional accident hypotheses, crevasse falls, avalanches, disorientation, causing minor anomalies, non-group slide marks, dragged vehicle, silver CRV reports in restricted area to remain unelevated to criminal investigation, as no clear physical evidence existed then. The presumed dead, accidental conclusion shifted the file to cold case after only 10 days, reducing chances for additional trace collection during the golden window. Third, 2011 search and analysis technology was limited. No high-resolution LiDAR in ice conditions, insufficient continuous satellite imagery, SAR drones not widely deployed, and limited tire track cross-referencing or terrain change analysis capability. These deficiencies kept the cabin, despite existing within a few miles of the snowmobile site, invisible to rescue forces at the time. From investigation findings and lessons learned, NPS updated SAR protocols for ice snow disappearances, prioritize terrain anomaly analysis from initial phase, mandate recording and evaluation of all unidentified vehicle marks, and integrate ice movement models into search boundary planning. The new SAR system also requires automatic cross-check of suspicious vehicle reports against registration data from adjacent counties, rather than merely noting unverified. The Glacier case led to thermal sensor and LiDAR drone equipping in many national parks with similar terrain. In forensics, the case became a standard cold environment investigation case study, where evidence is directly impacted by ice, temperature, humidity, and seasonal compression. Federal forensic training centers incorporated the Glacier cabin into simulation programs to train analysis of long-term climate-distorted scenes. The Glacier file was closed with official conclusion: 6 years of undetected perpetrator activity resulted from extreme geographic conditions, initial assessment lacking criminal focus, and era-specific technology limits. Factors which cold environment SR and forensic procedures have since been updated to prevent recurrence in future disappearances. The story of 3 snowmobilers vanishing at Glacier National Park and 6 years of secret detention in an ice-buried cabin is not only a remarkable investigative file, but also reflects very real challenges of modern American life, where millions regularly access wilderness areas, rely on public service infrastructure, and trust that search and rescue systems will always find them when risks arise. Details in the Glacier case show a far more complex reality. The Ethan Group's disappearance on December 3, 2011, initially assessed as accident victims. The Silver CRV's appearance never properly investigated. The ice-buried cabin evading SAR detection, all prove even advanced systems have limits against extreme natural conditions and calculated criminal behavior. Key lessons for Americans: never underestimate human-caused disappearance potential, especially with anomalies like strange vehicles, mismatched slide tracks, or sudden communication device signal loss. Second practical lesson: when engaging in outdoor activities, hiking, snowmobiling, camping, always share exact itineraries with at least 2 people. Use satellite signal dimly devices rather than relying solely on cell service. And set fixed check-in times so loved ones know when to alert SAR. Equally important is community responsibility. 2 independent 2011 reports of the Silver CRV in restricted areas were once dismissed as minor details, yet later became pivotal to the entire investigation. This reminds us that every anomaly, however small, can save lives if properly reported and archived. Finally, the Glacier story underscores an uncomfortable but necessary truth. Even in a nation with strong legal systems and advanced technology like the United States, personal safety still heavily depends on preparation, vigilance, and risk recognition from both human and environmental sources. Thank you for following this haunting investigative journey at Glacier. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other real stories with many hidden angles. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring mysteries that only the truth can resolve.